in the golden glow of Marston Grange, a grand English estate, a mysterious stranger in a striking blue suit slips among the guests, his smile hiding secrets. When Sir Henry Marston is found dead, a dagger in his heart, Hercule Poirot's little grey cells ignite. A cryptic letter, a discarded suit, and a trail of lies point to a killer hiding in plain sight. Was it the rebellious daughter, the ruined stockbroker, the vengeful novelist, or the disgraced doctor? As alibis unravel and a storm brews, Poirot sets a cunning trap to unmask the murderer in this chilling tale of deception and betrayal. Chapter 1. The man in the blue suit, the golden light of a late August afternoon, bathed the rolling lawns of Marston Grange, a grand estate tucked into the verdant folds of the Sussex countryside. The air carried the faint scent of roses and freshly cut grass, mingling with the distant hum of bees. Hercule Poirot, his small frame immaculate in a crisp linen suit, stood on the stone terrace, his eyes half closed against the glare. He adjusted the brim of his straw hat with a precise flick of his gloved fingers, his mustache quivering slightly as he surveyed the scene. The invitation to spend the weekend at Marston Grange had come from Sir Henry Marston, a retired diplomat known for his opulent gatherings and, more intriguingly, for a cryptic note hinting at a matter requiring Poirot's discreet expertise. Such an appeal was not one Poirot could resist. The guests assembled on the terrace were a study in contrasts, their voices weaving a tapestry of polite chatter punctuated by occasional laughter. Lady Eleanor Marston, Sir Henry's wife, moved among them with the grace of a seasoned hostess, her silver hair gleaming under a wide-brimmed hat, her eyes sharp and watchful. Her daughter, Clara, a young woman of 22 with a cascade of auburn curls, stood apart, her expression restless, as if the confines of the estate chafed her spirit. Nearby, Mr. Gerald Vance, a stockbroker with a too-easy smile and polished manners, sipped a gin and tonic, his gaze flitting from guest to guest. Miss Daphne Lyle, a novelist whose melodramatic tales had earned her a modest fame, gestured animatedly as she recounted a story to a small circle, her bracelets jangling. Dr. Rupert Hale, a lean man with a guarded demeanor, stood alone, nursing a glass of water and observing the others with clinical detachment. Among this assembly, one figure stood out to Poirot's discerning eye. A man in a striking blue suit, its cut modern and its hue vivid against the muted tones of the other guests' attire. He was tall, with dark hair slicked back and a face that was handsome, yet unplaceable, as if it resisted memory. He moved through the crowd with a quiet confidence, offering a nod here, a brief word there, but never lingering. Poirot noted the way the others responded, polite yet uncertain, as if unsure of his place among them. "Who is this man?" Poirot murmured to himself, his fingers brushing the edge of his mustache. "C'est très curieux." Dinner was announced, and the guests filed into the dining room, its long mahogany table aglow with candlelight. Sir Henry, a robust man with a florid complexion and a booming laugh, presided at the head, regaling the company with tales of his diplomatic days in Cairo. Poirot, seated between Clara and Miss Lyle, listened with half an ear, his attention drawn to the man in the blue suit who sat opposite. The stranger's conversation was sparse, his smile polite, but his eyes distant, as if his thoughts were elsewhere. Poirot caught Clara glancing at him, her brow furrowed, and noted Sir Henry's brief, tense exchange with the man earlier in the evening. The meal progressed through courses of consommé, roast pheasant, and a delicate lemon soufflé, the clink of silverware and murmur of voices filling the room. Then, abruptly, a scream shattered the harmony, a high, piercing cry from the direction of the library. The guests froze, forks poised, faces turning toward the sound. Sir Henry, his napkin still clutched in one hand, rose with a frown. "What the devil?" he began, but Poirot was already on his feet, his small frame moving with surprising agility toward the door. The library, a cavernous room lined with oak shelves and heavy with the scent of old leather, was lit by a single lamp on the desk. There, slumped forward, was Sir Henry, his white shirt stained crimson, an ornate dagger protruding from his chest. Lady Eleanor, who had been the first to reach the room, stood trembling, her hand pressed to her mouth. Clara gasped, clutching the doorframe, while Vance muttered an oath and Miss Lyle let out a theatrical sob. Dr. Hale stepped forward, his face grim, and confirmed what was obvious. Sir Henry was dead. Poirot's gaze swept the room. The window stood ajar, its curtains stirring in the evening breeze. A glass of brandy sat untouched on the desk, its amber surface catching the lamplight. The other guests crowded the doorway, their faces a mix of shock and fear. But one figure was conspicuously absent. "Where?" Poirot asked softly, his voice cutting through the murmurs. "Is the man in the blue suit?" A murmur rippled through the group. Nobody had seen him leave. Nobody, it seemed, knew him well enough to vouch for his presence. Poirot's eyes gleamed. The little gray cells, they were already at work. This was no ordinary murder, and the man in the blue suit, whether phantom or flesh, held the key to the puzzle. Chapter 2. The Scene of the Crime. The library of Marston Grange, bathed in the flickering glow of a single lamp, was a tableau of tragedy. Sir Henry Marston lay slumped over his desk, the ornate dagger in his chest glinting cruelly under the light. The air was heavy with the metallic tang of blood and the musty scent of old books. Hercule Poirot, his small frame taut with purpose, stood at the center of the room, his sharp eyes darting from the body to the surroundings. Captain Hastings, his face ashen, hovered near the doorway, where the other guests clustered in a stunned semicircle, their whispers rising like a low tide. Lady Eleanor, her composure fraying, clutched a handkerchief, while Clara's eyes brimmed with unshed tears. Gerald Vance ran a hand through his hair, his charm replaced by unease, and Miss Daphne Lyle, ever the dramatist, pressed a hand to her forehead, as if on the verge of fainting. Dr. Rupert Hale, his expression unreadable, stood apart, his gaze fixed on the floor. Poirot knelt beside the body, his gloved hands hovering with the precision of a watchmaker. The dagger's handle was intricately carved with a crest, a lion rampant, its lines worn but distinct. "Mon ami," he said to Hastings, his voice low but clear. "Observe the wound. It is clean, precise, directly to the heart. This was no act of impulse. The killer knew exactly what he was doing." He rose, his mustache twitching slightly, and turned his attention to the desk. A single glass of brandy, its amber contents untouched, stood beside a scattering of papers, letters, bills, and a small notebook, its pages blank save for a few cryptic figures. Poirot's fingers lingered over the glass, noting its pristine surface, free of fingerprints. "Curieux," he murmured. "The glass is placed as if for show, yet Sir Henry did not drink." The window, slightly ajar, admitted a cool breeze that stirred the heavy velvet curtains. Beyond, the darkened lawn stretched toward the woods, silent but for the rustle of leaves. Poirot examined the sill, his eyes narrowing at the absence of dust or smudges. "This window," he said. "It is meant to suggest an escape, but I think not. The killer wishes us to believe he fled, yet I suspect he is closer than we imagine." Inspector Reed, the local constable, arrived with a clatter of boots, his broad face set in a scowl. A man of action rather than subtlety, he surveyed the scene with a grunt. "Looks like a robbery gone wrong," he declared, striding to the window. "That fellow in the blue suit, seen him skulking about, but nobody knows him. Probably slipped out here after the deed." He pointed to the lawn, where faint footprints were visible in the dew-damp grass. Poirot's lips curved in a faint smile. "Non, Inspector. The footprints, they are too convenient, too deliberate. A man fleeing in haste does not tread so lightly, and the window, it is untouched, pristine. No, the killer is among us, hiding behind a mask of innocence." Reed bristled, unaccustomed to contradiction. "You're saying one of these fine folks did it?" He gestured to the guests, who shifted uncomfortably under his gaze. "Well, let's hear their stories then." Poirot, with the air of a conductor assembling an orchestra, gathered the guests in the drawing room, its chandeliers casting a soft glow over the tense assembly. He stood before the fireplace, his hands clasped behind his back, his eyes moving from face to face. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, "a crime has been committed, and we must establish where each of you was at the time of Sir Henry's death. The scream was heard at precisely 10 o'clock. Let us begin." Lady Eleanor, her voice steady despite her pallor, spoke first. "I was in the drawing room, arranging flowers for tomorrow's breakfast. I heard the scream and ran to the library." Her eyes met Poirot's, unflinching, but her fingers twisted the handkerchief into knots. Clara, her voice trembling, said, "I was in the garden, near the fountain. I needed air. Father and I had words earlier. I heard the scream and came running." Her hands fidgeted with the hem of her dress, and Poirot noted a faint smudge of earth on her sleeve. Gerald Vance, his usual polish dimmed, cleared his throat. "I was on the terrace, smoking a cigarette. I saw Clara in the garden, but I didn't hear anything until the scream." His eyes darted to Poirot, then away, as if seeking an escape. Miss Daphne Lyle, her voice theatrical, declared, "I was in my room, working on my novel. The muse, you see, does not wait. I heard the scream through my open window and hurried downstairs." She paused as if expecting applause, but Poirot's gaze remained impassive. Dr. Rupert Hale, his tone clipped, said, "I was in the billiard room, practicing a shot. I heard nothing until the commotion began." His hands were steady, but Poirot noticed a slight tremor in his jaw, a crack in his stoic facade. Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. "Each of you claims to have been alone, yet none heard anything until the scream. C'est intéressant, non?" He paced slowly, his polished shoes silent on the carpet. "And the man in the blue suit, where was he? He was seen at dinner, yet now he is gone, like a shadow in the night. Tell me, who spoke with him last?" A murmur passed through the group. Clara hesitated, then said, "I saw him speaking to Father in the hall before dinner. They seemed agitated. I couldn't hear what they said." Her voice faltered, and she looked away. Miss Lyle, eager to contribute, added, "He called himself Lawrence Blake, said he was a business associate of Sir Henry's, but he was so vague, almost as if he didn't want to be known. Her eyes gleamed with the thrill of mystery. Poirot's gaze lingered on Dr. Hale, who avoided his eyes. "And you, Monsieur le Docteur? Did you speak with this Mr. Blake?" Hale shook his head. "I barely noticed him. I was preoccupied." His voice was curt, and Poirot's mustache twitched. After dismissing the guests, Poirot returned to the library with Hastings. He examined the dagger again, noting the crest's intricate design. "This is no common weapon," he said. "It belongs to a family, a history. We must learn its story." He turned to the papers on the desk, sifting through them with care. Among them was a letter, half hidden beneath a blotter, addressed to Sir Henry in a sharp, slanted hand. It read, "You cannot ignore me forever. The debt must be settled. Meet me tonight. L.B." Poirot's eyes gleamed. L.B. Lawrence Blake, perhaps, or another, hiding behind initials. This letter, Hastings, is the first thread in the tapestry of this crime. Hastings frowned. "But Poirot, if the killer is among us, why the blue suit? Why the mystery?" Poirot tapped his temple. "To confuse, to distract. The killer wishes us to chase a phantom, but Hercule Poirot is not so easily led astray. The little gray cells, they see the truth beneath the deception. This man in the blue suit, he is the key, but not in the way we are meant to believe." As the clock struck midnight, Poirot stood alone in the library, the silence broken only by the ticking of the mantel clock. The scene was set, the players in place. The game, he knew, was only beginning. Chapter 3. The Mysterious Stranger. The morning after Sir Henry Marston's murder dawned with a heavy mist cloaking Marston Grange, as if the estate itself mourned its master. Hercule Poirot, undeterred by the damp chill, stood in the breakfast room, his coffee untouched, his eyes fixed on the gray veil beyond the windows. The guests, subdued by the previous night's horror, gathered reluctantly, their faces drawn and their conversation stilted. Captain Hastings, ever loyal, sat beside Poirot, his brow furrowed with concern. "It's a grim business, Poirot," he whispered. "That man in the blue suit, where has he gone? It's as if he vanished into thin air." Poirot's lips curved in a faint smile. "Non, mon ami. No one vanishes. They hide, they deceive, but they leave traces. The man in the blue suit is no phantom. He is a piece of the puzzle, and we shall find where he fits." He sipped his coffee at last, his movements deliberate, his mind already turning over the events of the previous night. After breakfast, Poirot summoned the guests to the drawing room, its high ceilings and gilt-framed portraits lending an air of solemnity. He stood before them, his small stature commanding despite the grandeur of the room. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice clear and measured. "The death of Sir Henry was no random act. It was planned, precise, and personal. The man in the blue suit, this Lawrence Blake, is central to our mystery. I ask you now, who spoke with him, who knew him, and what did he seek at Marston Grange?" A heavy silence followed, broken only by the crackle of the fire. Clara Marston, her auburn curls pinned haphazardly, spoke first, her voice low. "I saw him with Father yesterday afternoon, near the conservatory. They were arguing." Father's voice was raised, and Mr. Blake looked cold, almost menacing. I couldn't hear the words, but Father seemed upset. She twisted a ring on her finger, her eyes darting to her mother. Lady Eleanor, seated stiffly in a high-backed chair, nodded. Henry mentioned a business matter with a Mr. Blake, but he was vague. I assumed it was some trivial investment. Henry often dealt with such people. Her tone was controlled, but Poirot noted the slight tremor in her hands, betraying her unease. Gerald Vance, lounging against the mantelpiece, shrugged. I spoke to him briefly at drinks before dinner. He was charming enough, asked about the stock market, but didn't give much away. Said he was in imports, whatever that means. Vance's easy smile faltered under Poirot's scrutiny, and he lit a cigarette with a nervous flick. Miss Daphne Lyle, her flair for drama undimmed, leaned forward, her eyes bright. He was fascinating, Monsieur Poirot. Called himself Lawrence Blake, said he'd traveled the world. But there was something slippery about him. He asked me about my novels, but I swear he was more interested in Sir Henry's library than my stories. She paused, as if savoring the attention, then added, I saw him slip into the library before dinner, alone. Poirot's gaze sharpened, but he turned to Dr. Rupert Hale, who stood by the window, his face half hidden in shadow. And you, Monsieur le Docteur, you have been silent about this, Mr. Blake. Did you not speak with him? Hale's jaw tightened. I had no reason to. I saw him at dinner, that's all. I was busy with my own thoughts. His voice was clipped, his eyes avoiding Poirot's. Poirot noted the faint sheen of perspiration on Hale's brow, despite the cool morning. C'est curieux, Poirot said softly, pacing before the fireplace. This Mr. Blake is seen by all, known by none. He speaks with Sir Henry, enters the library, yet vanishes when murder is done. Is he the killer or a distraction? We must discover his purpose. He dismissed the guests, but his eyes lingered on Hale, whose abrupt departure betrayed a hint of agitation. Poirot and Hastings retired to the library, where the air still carried the faint scent of blood, though Sir Henry's body had been removed. Poirot examined the desk again, his fingers tracing the edge of the blotter where he had found the letter from L.B. He opened the notebook he had noticed the previous night, its pages filled with numbers and abbreviations. These are not random, Hastings, he said, pointing to a sequence. L.B., 10K, July. A debt, perhaps, or a transaction. Sir Henry was a man of secrets, it seems. Hastings frowned. But why would Blake, or whoever he is, kill Sir Henry over a debt? And where is he now? Poirot tapped his temple. Patience, mon ami. The little gray cells, they work. Let us explore the grounds. They stepped outside, the mist parting to reveal the estate's manicured paths. Poirot led the way to the conservatory, where Clara had seen her father argue with Blake. The glass structure was humid, filled with the heavy scent of orchids. Poirot examined the flagstone floor, his eyes catching a small crumpled paper near a potted fern. It was a receipt dated 2 days prior for a train ticket from London to Sussex made out to L. Blake. Voila, Poirot said, holding it up. Our mysterious stranger was no stranger to planning. He came here with purpose. He pocketed the receipt and moved to the edge of the lawn, where the footprints Inspector Reed had noted led toward the woods. Poirot knelt, his gloved hand hovering over the marks. These are shallow, Hastings. A man running for his life would leave deeper impressions. No, these were made to be seen. They followed the path to a small gardener's shed, its door slightly ajar. Inside, Poirot's eyes gleamed as he spotted a blue jacket, not unlike the one Blake had worn, folded neatly on a shelf. He lifted it, revealing a monogrammed handkerchief with the initials R.H. tucked beneath. "Interessant," he murmured. "This jacket is not Blake's. It is a costume, left here to mislead. And these initials, they belong to Dr. Hale, do they not?" Hastings gasped. "Hale? But why would he—" Poirot raised a hand. "We do not accuse, Hastings. We observe. The handkerchief may be a clue or a plant. We must tread carefully." He folded the jacket and handed it to Hastings. "Keep this safe. It is evidence, but of what? We shall see." As they returned to the house, Poirot's mind raced. The man in the blue suit was a shadow, a figure crafted to obscure the truth. Was he a guest in disguise or an outsider with a vendetta? The receipt, the handkerchief, the cryptic notebook, all were threads in a tapestry Poirot was determined to unravel. He glanced at Hastings, his voice low. "The killer, he plays a clever game, but Hercule Poirot is not so easily deceived. We shall find this Lawrence Blake, and with him, the truth." The mist thickened as they approached the house, its windows glowing faintly against the gray. Somewhere within, Poirot knew, the killer watched and waited. The game was far from over. Chapter 4. The Shadow of Motive. The afternoon sun pierced the mist that had shrouded Marston Grange, casting dappled light across the estate's rose garden, where Hercule Poirot walked with Captain Hastings. The air was fragrant with blooming roses, their petals a vivid contrast to the grim events within the house. Poirot, his cane tapping rhythmically on the gravel path, appeared lost in thought, his eyes half closed as if communing with his little gray cells. Hastings, ever the loyal companion, broke the silence. "Poirot, this business with the blue suit and that handkerchief, it's dashed peculiar. Do you really think Dr. Hale is involved, or is someone trying to pin the blame on him?" Poirot paused beside a cluster of crimson roses, his gloved fingers brushing a petal. "Mon ami, the handkerchief with R.H. is a clue, but whether it accuses or misleads, we cannot yet say. The motive, Hastings, that is the heart of this puzzle. Sir Henry was a man of wealth, influence, and secrets. To find his killer, we must uncover what drove them to such a desperate act." His voice was soft, but his eyes gleamed with purpose. They resumed their walk, Poirot's mind sifting through the details of the case. Sir Henry's fortune, he had learned from a discreet conversation with the butler, was held in a trust controlled by Lady Eleanor until Clara's marriage. Clara, however, had defied her parents' wishes by engaging herself to Julian Trent, a penniless artist with a reputation for bohemian ideals. The engagement had caused a rift, with Sir Henry threatening to cut Clara from the trust if she persisted. "Money," Poirot mused aloud. "It is a powerful motive, but not the only one." He turned to Hastings. "Consider, mon ami, the others. Mr. Gerald Vance, the charming stockbroker. He invested heavily in a venture tied to Sir Henry's funds, a venture that failed spectacularly. A man who loses money may harbor resentment. Non?" Hastings nodded, recalling Vance's nervous demeanor in the drawing room. "And Miss Daphne Lyle," Poirot continued. "She spoke of a manuscript, one she claims Sir Henry stole. A writer's work is their soul. Such a theft could provoke a passion for revenge. As for Dr. Hale, there is a whisper of scandal, a patient lost under his care, a patient connected to Sir Henry. His practice suffered, his reputation tarnished. Each guest, Hastings, has a shadow of motive trailing behind them." They reached a stone bench, and Poirot sat, gesturing for Hastings to join him. "But the man in the blue suit," he said, "he is the enigma. Is he one of these, disguised to confuse us, or an outsider with a grudge we have yet to uncover? The receipt for the train ticket, the jacket, the handkerchief, they are pieces of a masquerade. Hastings frowned. But Poirot, if the killer is among the guests, why create this Lawrence Blake at all? Why not strike and be done with it? Poirot's mustache twitched. To create doubt, to shift suspicion, the blue suit is a costume, a distraction. The killer wishes us to chase a ghost while they stand before us, innocent in appearance. But Hercule Poirot sees beyond appearances. Determined to probe further, Poirot returned to the house and sought out Lady Eleanor in the morning room, where she sat with a ledger, her face a mask of composure. "Madame," he began, his tone gentle but probing, "your husband's trust. It is a significant sum, oui? And it passes to you until Mademoiselle Clara marries. This caused tension, perhaps." Lady Eleanor's eyes narrowed, but she answered calmly. Henry and Clara disagreed about her engagement, yes. He wanted her to marry well, to secure the family's future. Julian Trent is unsuitable, but Clara is headstrong. Henry was firm, but he loved her. Her voice wavered, and Poirot noted the flicker of grief beneath her poise. Leaving her, Poirot found Gerald Vance in the billiard room, idly rolling a cue ball across the green felt. "Monsieur Vance," Poirot said, "your investments with Sir Henry, they did not prosper, I understand. This must have been a blow." Vance's smile was tight. "Business is a gamble, Monsieur Poirot. Sir Henry backed a venture that went sour. I lost money, yes, but so did he. No reason to kill a man over it." His fingers gripped the cue stick, and Poirot observed a faint tremor in his hand. Next, Poirot sought Miss Daphne Lyle, who was scribbling furiously in a notebook on the terrace. "Mademoiselle," he said, "you spoke of a manuscript. Tell me more." Daphne's eyes flashed with indignation. "It was my novel, Monsieur Poirot, a story of betrayal and intrigue. Sir Henry read it, claimed it as his own idea for a memoir. He threatened to publish it under his name. My work, stolen." She clutched her notebook, her voice rising. "I confronted him, but I didn't kill him." Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable, and moved on to Dr. Hale, whom he found in the conservatory, examining a rare orchid. "Monsieur le Docteur," Poirot said, "there was a scandal in your past, was there not? A patient, perhaps, under Sir Henry's patronage?" Hale's face darkened. "That was years ago, a misunderstanding. Sir Henry was influential in the matter, yes, but I've moved on." His voice was steady, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of anger. As evening fell, Poirot and Hastings reconvened in the library. Poirot examined the notebook again, its cryptic figures nagging at his mind. "These numbers," he said, "they suggest transactions, perhaps illicit. Sir Henry was no saint, it seems." He turned to the letter from L.B., its words etched in his memory. A debt, a meeting, a threat. "We must find this L.B., Hastings. He is either our killer or a pawn in their game." A sudden commotion interrupted them. A maid, breathless, burst into the room. "Sir, I saw him. The man in the blue suit near the stables, not an hour ago." Poirot and Hastings hurried to the stables, where the scent of hay and leather hung heavy. The ground was soft, marked with fresh hoofprints, and beside a bale of straw lay a cigarette butt, its tip stamped with a French brand, Gauloise's. Poirot picked it up with a handkerchief, his eyes narrowing. "This is no coincidence, Hastings. Someone wishes us to believe Blake is still here, lurking. but I think it is another thread in the deception." He pocketed the cigarette butt, his mind racing. The motives were clear: money, revenge, betrayal. But the man in the blue suit remained a shadow, a figure crafted to obscure the truth. Poirot's little gray cells hummed with anticipation. The killer, he knew, was watching, and he would not let them slip through his grasp. Chapter 5. The alibi unravels. The late afternoon light filtered through the tall windows of Marston Grange, casting long shadows across the polished floors as Hercule Poirot sat in the morning room, a delicate porcelain teacup in his hand. The air was thick with the scent of jasmine from a vase on the table, but Poirot's mind was far from the pleasantries of tea. Captain Hastings, seated opposite, fidgeted with his napkin, his face a mixture of curiosity and frustration. "Poirot," he said, "that cigarette butt by the stables. It's a clue, surely, but why would the killer leave such obvious traces? It feels like we're being led in circles." Poirot set his cup down with a precise clink. "Mon ami, circles are what the killer desires. The blue suit, the cigarette, the footprints. They are all part of a performance designed to distract. But Hercule Poirot does not chase shadows. We must look to the alibis, for there we shall find the crack in the facade." His eyes gleamed, his mustache quivering with the thrill of the hunt. Determined to test the guests' stories, Poirot began with Clara Marston, inviting her to join him in the conservatory, where the humid air clung to the skin and the orchids seemed to listen. Clara, her auburn curls slightly wilted, sat on a wicker chair, her hands clasped tightly. "Mademoiselle," Poirot began, his tone gentle but probing, "you were in the garden at the time of the murder, near the fountain, oui? Yet your sleeve bore a smudge of earth. Were you perhaps elsewhere, closer to the stables?" Clara's eyes widened, then narrowed. "I told you, I was by the fountain. I knelt to pick up a hairpin that fell in the grass. That's why my sleeve was dirty." Her voice was defiant, but her fingers twisted the ring on her hand, a nervous tick Poirot noted. "And this Mr. Blake," Poirot pressed. "You saw him argue with your father. Did he speak to you of anything specific? Perhaps your father's business, or this trust that controls your inheritance?" Clara hesitated, her gaze flickering to the glass walls. "He asked about father's investments, whether they were secure. I thought it odd. He seemed too interested, almost prying, but I didn't tell him anything." Her voice faltered, and Poirot's eyes softened, though his mind remained sharp. Leaving Clara, Poirot sought out Gerald Vance, finding him in the smoking room, a cigarette in hand and a glass of whiskey on the table. The stockbroker's usual charm was frayed, his eyes red-rimmed. "Monsieur Vance," Poirot said, seating himself opposite, "your alibi is the terrace, smoking alone. Yet Mademoiselle Clara saw you there, and you saw her in the garden. A convenient mutual confirmation, non?" Vance's smile was strained. "Just the truth, Monsieur Poirot. I was smoking, she was in the garden. We didn't speak." He took a drag on his cigarette, and Poirot noted the brand. Players, not Gauloises. "As for Sir Henry, yes, we had a deal go bad. He backed a mining venture in Rhodesia, and it collapsed. I lost a packet, but so did he. Killing him wouldn't bring my money back." Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. "And this Mr. Blake, did he speak of such ventures?" Vance shrugged. He mentioned imports, something about rare goods. Didn't seem like Sir Henry's sort of thing, but I didn't pry. His fingers tapped the table, betraying his unease. Next, Poirot found Miss Daphne Lyle in the library, perched on a ladder, ostensibly searching for a book, but clearly eavesdropping on the murmurs of the household. "Mademoiselle," Poirot said, his voice cutting through the silence, "you were in your room, writing, at the time of the murder, yet you heard the scream through an open window. Tell me, did you see anything from your window? Perhaps a figure moving toward the stables?" Daphne descended the ladder, her movements theatrical. "I saw nothing, Monsieur Poirot. I was lost in my work, my novel, you know, A Tale of Treachery. But Sir Henry—" She paused, her eyes gleaming. "He stole my story, claimed it as his own for some memoir. I confronted him that morning, told him I'd expose him. He laughed, said no one would believe me." Her voice trembled with indignation, and Poirot noted the passion in her words. "Did you see Mr. Blake after this confrontation?" he asked. She nodded. "He was lurking near the library door, listening. I thought he was just nosy, but now—" She trailed off, her imagination clearly spinning. Finally, Poirot approached Dr. Rupert Hale, who was in the billiard room methodically chalking a cue. The physician's face was a mask of calm, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of wariness. "Monsieur le Docteur," Poirot said, "your alibi is the billiard room, alone. Yet a cigarette butt Gauloise was found by the stables, and I observe you carry such cigarettes in your pocket." He gestured to Hale's jacket, where the edge of a blue pack was visible. Hale's hand froze on the cue. "I smoke Gauloises, yes, but I wasn't at the stables. I was here, practicing. I told you, I heard nothing until the scream." His voice was steady, but Poirot saw the pulse quicken at his temple. "And Mr. Blake?" Poirot asked. "You claim no acquaintance, yet you were both in the library before dinner. Were you not?" Hale's eyes narrowed. "I don't know what you're implying. I barely spoke to the man. He was Sir Henry's business, not mine." He turned back to the billiard table, dismissing Poirot with a curt nod. As night fell, Poirot and Hastings sat in the drawing room, the fire casting flickering shadows. Poirot held the Gauloise's cigarette butt, wrapped in his handkerchief, and the monogrammed R.H. handkerchief from the shed. "Hastings," he said, "the alibis, they are like a house of cards. Plausible, but fragile. Each guest has a reason to resent Sir Henry, and each has a gap in their story. Clara's earth-stained sleeve, Vance's convenient sighting, Daphne's overheated passion, Hale's cigarettes, they all point to something hidden." Hastings leaned forward. "But the blue suit, Poirot, how does it fit? Is Blake real, or is he one of them?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "That, mon ami, is the question. The suit is a disguise, a mask to confuse us. But the killer made a mistake. They left traces that betray them. The cigarette, the handkerchief, the letter from L.B. They are not accidents. They are clues, and we shall follow them to the truth." The clock chimed, its notes echoing in the quiet room. Poirot rose, his small frame radiating determination. The alibis were unraveling, and the shadow of the killer was growing clearer. The man in the blue suit, whether real or illusion, would not elude Hercule Poirot for long. Chapter 6. The trap is set. The evening at Marston Grange descended with a heavy stillness, the air thick with the promise of a storm. The drawing-room, its chandeliers dimmed to a soft glow, was a stage set for tension, the guests seated in a semicircle, their faces etched with unease. Hercule Poirot stood before the fireplace, his small frame commanding the room, his eyes glinting like polished obsidian. Captain Hastings, seated near the door, watched with a mixture of anticipation and apprehension, sensing that Poirot was about to spring a trap. The little Belgian detective clasped his hands behind his back, his mustache perfectly symmetrical, a sign that his little gray cells were at their sharpest. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice clear and deliberate. "The murder of Sir Henry Marston was a crime of calculation, not of chance. The man in the blue suit, this so-called Lawrence Blake, has been presented to us as a phantom, a figure who appears and vanishes at will. But I, Hercule Poirot, say to you now, he is no phantom. He is a creation, a disguise worn by one among us to obscure the truth." A murmur rippled through the room. Lady Eleanor's fingers tightened on her armrest. Clara's eyes widened. Gerald Vance shifted uncomfortably, and Miss Daphne Lyle let out a theatrical gasp. Dr. Rupert Hale, standing by the window, remained motionless, his face a mask of restraint. Poirot paced slowly, his polished shoes silent on the Aubusson carpet. "This afternoon," he continued, "I made an announcement to the household. I claim to have found a witness, a gardener perhaps or a maid, who saw the killer flee the library. This was, I confess, a small deception. There is no such witness. But the killer does not know this, and they will act to protect themselves. Tonight, we shall see who takes the bait." Hastings leaned forward, his brow furrowed. "Poirot, you mean to flush them out? But how?" Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "By creating pressure, mon ami. The guilty one will reveal themselves through their actions, their nerves. Observe, and we shall see." He turned to the guests, his gaze sweeping over them like a searchlight. "Let us review the facts. Sir Henry was killed with a dagger bearing a crest, a lion rampant, a symbol of heritage. The letter from L.B. spoke of a debt and a meeting. The blue suit, found in a shed, was a prop, left with a handkerchief marked R.H. The cigarette butt, Gauloise's, points to a specific smoker. Each clue is a thread, and together they weave a pattern." Clara's voice broke the silence, trembling but defiant. "You're saying one of us is this Blake? But why? Why go to such lengths?" Poirot's eyes softened, but his tone remained firm. "To confuse, mademoiselle. To make us chase a shadow while the killer stands before us, cloaked in innocence. But the little gray cells, they see through the masquerade." He turned to Dr. Hale, whose posture stiffened. "Monsieur le Docteur, you smoke Gauloises, oui? And the handkerchief with R.H. It is yours, is it not? You were not in the billiard room as you claimed. You were in the library, perhaps, or near the stables, leaving clues to misdirect." Hale's face flushed, his voice sharp. "This is outrageous. I told you, I was in the billiard room. That handkerchief could belong to anyone. Robert Harris, the groundskeeper, for all I know. As for the cigarettes, plenty of people smoke Gauloise." His hands clenched, and Poirot noted the defensive edge in his words. Poirot raised a hand, silencing the room. "We shall see, monsieur. Tonight I have asked Inspector Reed to station his men around the estate. If anyone attempts to retrieve the blue suit from the shed, or to dispose of evidence, they will be caught. The trap is set." The guests exchanged uneasy glances, the air crackling with suspicion. Lady Eleanor spoke, her voice icy. Monsieur Poirot, are you suggesting we are all suspects, to be watched like criminals? Not all, madame, Poirot replied. Only one. But until that one is revealed, we must be vigilant. As the guests dispersed, their footsteps echoing in the hushed corridors, Poirot drew Hastings aside. Mon ami, keep your eyes open. The killer will act tonight, I am certain. They cannot resist the urge to cover their tracks. Hastings nodded, though his expression betrayed doubt. But Poirot, what if they don't take the bait? What if Blake is real and he's long gone? Poirot's eyes twinkled. Then we shall find another way, but I believe the killer is here, among us, and their nerves will betray them. The blue suit, the cigarette, the handkerchief, they are not accidents, they are mistakes, and the killer knows it. That night, Poirot and Hastings positioned themselves in the library, where a window overlooked the path to the stables. The house was silent, save for the occasional creak of settling wood. Poirot, seated in an armchair, his eyes fixed on the darkness beyond, seemed almost serene, his mind a whirl of deduction. Hastings, less patient, shifted restlessly. Poirot, how long must we wait? It's past midnight. Patience, Hastings, Poirot whispered. The guilty heart is impatient. They will move. At 1 o'clock, a faint sound reached them, a soft crunch of gravel. Poirot's hand gripped Hastings's arm, and they peered through the window. A figure, cloaked in shadow, moved swiftly toward the shed. The moonlight caught a glint of metal, a key, perhaps, or something more sinister. Poirot motioned for silence, and they crept outside, keeping to the shadows. The figure reached the shed, pausing to glance around before slipping inside. Poirot and Hastings approached, their steps muffled by the grass. A moment later, Inspector Reed emerged from the darkness, his lantern casting a harsh light. "Got you," he barked, flinging open the shed door. Inside, Dr. Rupert Hale stood frozen, the blue suit in his hands, his face pale with shock. "This isn't what it looks like," he stammered. I was checking for evidence, to help." Poirot stepped forward, his voice calm but unyielding. "Monsieur Hale, you have walked into the trap. The suit, the handkerchief, the cigarette, they all point to you. But it is not enough. Tell me, why did you come here tonight? To retrieve or to plant?" Hale's eyes darted wildly. "I'm innocent. Someone's framing me. I found the suit here earlier. I came to see if it was still there." Poirot's mustache twitched. "We shall see, monsieur. Inspector, take him to the house. The truth will come, and soon." As Reed led Hale away, Hastings turned to Poirot, his voice low. "Is he our man, Poirot? Or is this another trick?" Poirot's gaze was fixed on the shed, where the blue suit lay discarded. "The trap has caught something, Hastings, but whether it is the killer or a pawn, we shall discover. The game is nearing its end." The storm broke at last, rain lashing the windows as Poirot returned to the house, his mind racing. The killer's mask was slipping, and the truth was within reach. Chapter 7. The Final Revelation. The storm that had threatened Marston Grange all evening unleashed its fury, rain hammering against the windows of the drawing room where Hercule Poirot had gathered the guests once more. Lightning flickered, casting stark shadows across their tense faces, each illuminated briefly before sinking back into the dim glow of the chandeliers. Captain Hastings stood by the door, his expression a mix of awe and apprehension, knowing Poirot was poised to unveil the truth. Dr. Rupert Hale, escorted back from the shed by Inspector Reed, sat rigid, his hands clenched, while the others, Lady Eleanor, Clara, Gerald Vance, and Miss Daphne Lyle, watched with bated breath. The air crackled with anticipation, as if the storm itself were an accomplice in Poirot's denouement. Poirot stood before the fireplace, his small frame radiating authority, his eyes sweeping over the assembly like a maestro before a symphony. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice steady despite the thunder's rumble. "The murder of Sir Henry Marston was a crime of precision, cloaked in misdirection. The man in the blue suit, this Lawrence Blake, was not a man at all, but a shadow cast to deceive us. Tonight, we shall unmask the true killer." A gasp escaped Miss Lyle, her hand fluttering to her chest, while Clara's eyes darted to Hale, who stared stonily ahead. Poirot continued, his tone measured. "Let us reconstruct the crime. Sir Henry was stabbed in the library, with a dagger bearing a crest, a lion rampant. A letter from L.B. spoke of a debt and a meeting. A blue suit was found in the shed, with a handkerchief marked R.H. A Gauloise's cigarette was left by the stables. Each clue was placed to point us toward a phantom, but the little gray cells, they see the truth." He turned to Dr. Hale, whose face was pale but defiant. "Monsieur le Docteur, you were caught tonight in the shed, holding the blue suit. You claim you were investigating, but I say you were ensuring the evidence remained as you intended. The handkerchief, the cigarette, they bear your mark, do they not?" Hale leapt to his feet, his voice sharp. "This is absurd. I told you, I was framed. Someone planted those things to make me look guilty." His eyes swept the room, seeking allies, but found only suspicion. Poirot raised a hand, silencing him. "Let us consider the motives. Sir Henry's trust, controlled by Lady Eleanor, was a source of tension for Mademoiselle Clara, whose engagement to an artist displeased her father. Monsieur Vance lost a fortune in a failed venture tied to Sir Henry. Mademoiselle Lyle accused Sir Henry of stealing her manuscript. And you, Dr. Hale, suffered a scandal, a patient's death linked to Sir Henry's influence that ruined your practice. Each of you had reason to resent him, but only one had the means and the cunning to act." He paced slowly, his polished shoes gleaming. "The dagger's crest is the key. It is not a common weapon, but a family heirloom. I have made inquiries, and the lion rampant belongs to the Hale family, passed down through generations. You, Monsieur Hale, brought it to Marston Grange, did you not?" Hale's jaw tightened. "My family's crest, yes, but I didn't bring it here. Someone stole it, used it to frame me." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And the letter from L.B., a clever touch. You wrote it, monsieur, to create the myth of Lawrence Blake, a mysterious stranger who could bear the blame. You wore the blue suit before dinner, ensuring you were seen, then discarded it in the shed, planting the handkerchief to suggest another's guilt. The cigarette by the stables, another of your Gauloises, left to reinforce the trail." Hale's voice rose, desperate. "You have no proof. Anyone could have written that letter, taken my handkerchief, smoked that cigarette." Poirot's smile was serene. "But the notebook, monsieur, tells a different story. Those figures, LB, 10K, July, they are not debts, but payments. Sir Henry was blackmailing you. Was he not? The scandal of your patient's death was no accident. Sir Henry ensured it was exposed, demanding money to keep silent. You paid, but the burden grew too heavy. You planned his death, using the blue suit to create a scapegoat. Lady Eleanor gasped, her composure cracking. Blackmail? Henry would never. Poirot turned to her, his tone gentle. Madame, your husband was a man of secrets. The notebook reveals transactions with many initials, not just L.B. He profited from others' misfortunes. Dr. Hale, driven to ruin, saw murder as his escape. Hale lunged toward the door, but Inspector Reed, ever vigilant, blocked his path, seizing his arm. Enough! Hale shouted, his voice breaking. Yes, he ruined me. He bled me dry, threatened to destroy what little I had left. I wore the suit, wrote the letter, planned it all, but I didn't mean for it to go this far. His confession hung in the air, raw and final. Clara sobbed, burying her face in her hands, while Vance stared at the floor, his cigarette forgotten. Miss Lyle's eyes gleamed with the thrill of a story come to life, and Lady Eleanor sat frozen, her world unraveling. Reed handcuffed Hale, his face grim. You're coming with me, Doctor. As Hale was led away, the room fell silent, the storm's roar filling the void. Hastings turned to Poirot, his voice low. How did you know, Poirot? The crest, the blackmail, it all fit together so neatly. Poirot tapped his temple, his eyes alight. The little gray cells, mon ami. They see the pattern where others see chaos. The dagger's crest was too specific to be coincidence. The letter's tone betrayed a personal grudge, and Hale's nerves, his rush to the shed tonight, confirmed his guilt. He could not resist checking his trap, fearing it would ensnare him. The guests dispersed, their footsteps heavy with the weight of truth. Poirot and Hastings stepped onto the terrace, where the rain had softened to a drizzle, the air fresh and cool. Hastings shook his head. Poor devil, driven to murder by blackmail. But why the blue suit, Poirot? Why such an elaborate ruse? Poirot gazed at the darkened lawn, his voice soft. To buy time, Hastings. To make us doubt. To point us toward a ghost while he played the innocent. But no disguise can hide the truth from Hercule Poirot. The killer in the blue suit was no stranger. He was a man consumed by his own despair, hiding in plain sight. The storm faded, leaving only the whisper of rain. The case was closed, but Poirot's mind, ever restless, already turned to the next puzzle the world might offer.